Amani, welcome to R4E, and I appreciate you joining today.
Arjan, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Good to
It's
see you. You're looking great, man.
it's so good to see you. It's been too long, and I'm glad we have can only see each other on Zoom, but we got to get together in person here soon. Before we jump into to your story here, because I'm so excited to share with the audience. Your walk-up song was "War" by Edwin Starr. You started giving me a little bit of the beat on the camera here before we were recording. You don't have to do it now that we're live, but tell me why that's your walk-up song, why it's important to you.
So I think it's I wasn't expecting to go into this song per se, but I think this song is the message is powerful. It speaks to the value or lack thereof of using physical violence to solve real world problems. Essentially, he's getting at like he's asking like war, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. And he's just talking about the volume of death that happens, with some of the wars that we experienced, and he's basically proposing he's questioning the value proposition of it. But in addition to that, it's just a funky song, like the beat, the melody, the horns, the drums. It's one of those songs every now and then when I'm taking a shower, I'll put on, and it just gives me a little bop. I get going. So yeah, that's pretty much all I can say about that song.
No, I like it. It's a unique one. I if I were to be a betting man, I was gonna guess you were gonna say Enter Sandman or something more hokey oriented, which is probably a good segue to introduce you a little bit more to the folks that haven't had a chance to meet you yet. So our paths crossed in my time in Blacksburg while you were down there as well. Would love to maybe allow you to give the audience a quick snippet of who you are, what you're doing now, and then we can unpack your story a little further.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Amani. I grew up as a military kid. We moved around to a lot of different military installations across the United States. Fayetteville, North Carolina was our last stop. Fort Bragg for those veterans and veteran families. And I was an athlete in high school. I did pretty well. I earned a full scholarship to go to Virginia Tech, and I accepted that one. I played football for a year and some change, but ultimately I had a foot injury that just changed my life. Really, I had a foot injury that, and it was funny because I never really had serious injuries throughout my whole life. My third year of college, I had a foot injury where I couldn't walk for about 6 months on my own. So that required surgery. It required a cast. I did hold crutches to boot to that whole process, and it was devastating, but it was also enlightening for me because I had to start grappling with who I was outside of being an athlete and what I wanted my future to be. So I took my education very seriously. I used that as a means to explore myself and the world around me. And so I'll fast forward, and I went from undergrad at Virginia Tech, graduated, went to Arizona State to pursue my master's in higher education. And there's where I got excited about learning more and went back to Virginia Tech and worked on campus in several capacities and got into a PhD program, which is public administration and public affairs. And as I worked in those different capacities on campus and working on my PhD program, I realized that, there's more that I need to learn if I really want to make an impact in this world and help people. So I went to grad school full time, opened up my summers, and started to work at the Federal Reserve Board in DC. That's where I met my wife. That's where I got exposed to the Community Reinvestment Act and how financial institutions play such a vital role in the world economy and also into local economies and certain communities, and how they have a responsibility to serve those households, families, communities that were excluded from the financial system historically. So long story short, I've had several roles in the federal government, the Boston Federal Reserve. I recently worked at the Treasury Department, where I worked on a lot of cool initiatives at the White House, CFPB, and Office of Consumer Policy and Domestic Finance. Got a lot of great relationships. And now I'm at Industrial Bank, which is a minority depository institution. It's a Black-owned bank. It's been operating for 90 something years in the Washington DMV area. Can you imagine how challenging it was for a Black-owned bank to operate in the 50s and 60s? And for them to still be around is incredibly impressive. And I'm so excited to be there. So I serve as the Vice President Compliance Officer, where I oversee our Community Reinvestment Act function and our compliance with all consumer financial protection regulations and laws and miscellaneous host of other miscellaneous activities. So very happy to be where I am today, and I'm very happy to share my story.
Yeah, look, I'm so excited to have you on to dive into that a little bit further. Just going back to your initial point around one, being a military kid, and then two, your football or start your football career. I mean, I imagine some of the necessity of moving around being a military kid probably helped you kind of bob and weave after your football injury to give you the flexibility and to know that nothing's permanent. And you had I feel like a lot of athletes, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of leaders are sometimes tied to their identity to their role, to their position, whatever it might be. And so do you think you had any of the background of your kind of military upbringing that helped you in your injury and transition out of football?
Absolutely. And when I was a child, every time we moved, I cried. I cried
Mm.
every time because I had my friends in a certain place, like Illinois, for example. And it was just upsetting to have to leave them and think about having to make new friends, get adjusted to a new place. But after a while, I got used to meeting new people and living in new places and realizing that, hey, the last house we lived in wasn't that much different, or isn't that much different from our new house. The last neighborhood, the last school is not that much different from our new neighborhood, our new school. And I can make friends all in the same. So it really affected my upbringing. And actually, yeah, to your point, it gave me a sense of flexibility where that's okay to get up and move and to try something new and to experience something new. So I definitely think that had an impact on my life, and it still does to this day, right? Because I'm used to meeting and greeting with new people in different spaces. In addition to my own personality, I don't feel like I have to be in one place. And right now, a funny story, I'm in the Houston area, but I work in DC. So I'm splitting my time. So we literally have two places, one in Houston and one in DC. So I'm here for 2 months. And every quarter, I go back to DC for 3 to 4 weeks. So to your point, that flexibility is still manifesting in my life to this day.
It's a good trait to have, and I'm sure there's a lot of people envious of it. And I want to hear more about that before we jump to industrial banking today. I'd be curious. So you go down to Virginia Tech. For someone that was traveling all around as a kid, you go to a place, Blacksburg, Virginia, that is known for being one of the tightest knit communities
Yes.
in our worlds, at least, maybe
Yes.
in the West or in the US even.
In the world, it's okay.
I'll call it the world because I truly think it is, just from being down there in my time. What was that like for you going down from North Carolina or up from North Carolina to Blacksburg, your time going and being a star athlete at Virginia Tech, and then what was the first couple? I mean, that's probably a lot of pressure in some ways for having the full ride and going to school,
Right.
and then transitioning after your injury. I mean, focusing so much on your academics as well. What was that? What was your headspace like during that time, and what was that period like of your life?
Yeah, so well, first I will say I wasn't a star. I had some high expectations, but my injuries really kept me from progressing on the field, which is a blessing in disguise for me. Hindsight is 2020, of course. But when I was young, of course, like going to Virginia Tech and playing for Bud Foster, Coach Beamer, I meant everything to me. Getting on the field and winning some games in front of the raucous home crowd and making an impact and maybe have an opportunity to play in the league. That was a dream of mine. And I remember going to Virginia Tech for the first time. I was unsure about what would happen, of course, but as soon as I got there, the community embraced me and our teammates. And of course, as a football athlete, we get a little bit of preferential treatment, but I really enjoyed having those moments where people didn't know I was an athlete and they just reached out to me, connected with me in class, and they really encouraged me to learn and step outside of just being an athlete. And my relationship with my professors then and to this day, really shaped my understanding of the world. I'm still in the PhD program in a dissertation phase now. It's taken me a little while, but I've been working and doing a program part-time. But that was my whole reason for going back to Virginia Tech to work on my PhD. I feel like it was a place that nurtured me as an undergraduate, and also it nurtured me as a graduate and as an adult as I was learning deeply about myself and about the world through my PhD program. And I will say this, when I hurt my foot in my third year, Coach Beamer and his staff, they kept me on scholarship. I built some relationships in the athletics department, and I was able to intern in the athletics department, for a summer and throughout my whole senior year. And then I was able to convince them to allow me to study abroad. And just those three experiences alone, football, being able to also work in the athletics administration as an intern, and also being able to study abroad, in addition to finishing with 2 degrees, I feel like I had such a full experience that was very unique. So yeah, the community is really tight. I spent a lot of time there. I'm still connected to a lot of people there, and I'm always happy to run into Hokies and be connected to people like you and your family, via Hokie Nation.
My family thinks so highly of you, and I'm like I said, so thrilled to have you on today. I guess to that end, I'd love to know more about yourself. I feel like an athlete, especially in one of the kind of main programs, getting to study abroad is pretty unique. What was that program like for you? Did you face any bit of envy from your teammates or anyone else in the programs that were in the space? Or what was that study abroad program like for you? Or it probably wasn't a conventional path for a D1 athlete.
It was phenomenal. Again, because I was trying to figure out my life outside of sports, I spent a lot of time in office hours with my professors. And I can't remember who told me about the study abroad program. They were like, Zoe, you should just go for it. It'd be a good experience. And I went through the process, applied, and it was a winter study abroad. So we went down to Colombia, South America for 3 weeks, and we went to different cities throughout the country. It was a business study abroad. And it was great because I was the only athlete, and all the other students, we built this close-knit relationship because we all, like, people were trying food, getting sick, going out, going to the beaches, exploring these different businesses in South America. And we grew so much together. It was a tight-knit family. And that experience was really transformative. It helped me understand Spanish a lot more, and it helped me understand the world a lot more. So I was just, again, really appreciative of the fact that an athlete like myself, who was only thinking about football and maybe track and trying to progress on the field and to the next level, to be able to slow down and get some professional experience as an intern, and to also step outside of the US as a Hokie with a Hokie group on a study abroad opportunity. So I'm just very thankful for all the people involved that helped me facilitate that opportunity.
Absolutely. And that was your senior year. At what point, I can't imagine it was as a 22, 23-year-old in Blacksburg, but at what point did you say, all right, I'm going to go continue down the path of higher education and continue to rack up degrees? And even to this day, you're under your PhD program now. So at what point did you say, all right, this is the path I'm going to go down? What was that process like for you?
So when I was interning with athletics administration, I was learning more about the systematic management of athletics. And it's a big business, it's a huge enterprise, not just at Virginia Tech, but around the nation. And I realized that there were folks like myself, athletes coming from certain places, that our whole identity was tied up with being an athlete. And the fact that we had to address life afterwards was just such a black hole question that a lot of us could get lost in. And I was like, you know what? I need to figure out how to help athletes figure out life outside of being an athlete, even though no matter what, it's still in us. We still have to get a job outside of sports. I think there's an NCAA commercial that says, 97% of athletes never go pro. And so I decided to pursue my master's in higher education at Arizona State with the intent to help at-risk student athletes, other student athletes figure out themselves, their majors, career options, internships, and all that stuff. So if sports didn't work out, there will be a buffer, there will be another alternative opportunity, something that still resonates with them, even though it's not sports, but so they can live, fulfilling lives. But as I went through that process, I just kept learning more and more, and it's like a domino effect. And I was like, you know what? When I'm at Arizona State, I'm helping people, I'm learning, I'm in a master's program. And I was like, wait, I think there's more that I need to learn if I really want to help people navigate their lives post sports. And what I was really getting at, I was right on the tip of the iceberg of the economic order that we're all a part of, domestically and internationally, right? This capitalistic free market economy that has a heavy government intervention at times, and there's the local, state, federal government, and all these things that are at play that shapes our livelihoods, our lived experiences, our career trajectory, our families, our relationships, which churches we go to, right? Which schools we go to, right? And so I just kept learning, and that's when I went back to Virginia Tech. I said, let me jump into this PhD program, and then so on and so forth. And I'm a big believer of theory and practice and connecting the two. So that's why a lot of my education has been part-time education, part-time in practice, because I find that I learn a lot from putting theory into practice and putting practice into theory, and then settling in the in-between phase and thinking about both aspects. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Very much so, very much. And so to that end, I mean, you're someone that's seen the whole kind of gambit of higher education from start to finish, being an athlete, being a student athlete, and even in master's programs, grad programs, what have you. To your point there about theory and practice, do you think that the current system outlined, and just maybe let's start with undergrad, do you think that that allows for students to tackle that? Mind you, your student athlete experience is probably different than what I was going through as just a student, but do you think that there needs to be a sort of kind of higher ed reform in some ways where students are able to kind of go and apply more regularly? I know some groups like the engineers have the co-ops, and there's certain ways that folks can actually apply what they're learning in the classroom as they're going iteratively. But I feel like that's a huge theme that you hear from a lot of folks pushing any sort of higher ed reform. But I'd be curious from your seats, like, I feel like that just is such an obvious way for students to grow and to learn and be better leaders of tomorrow.
Right. I think you're right. There's a lot of conversations, and this is not my day-to-day bag anymore. However, I would say that experiential learning is the key. And the other part is helping students understand their academic majors and minors and how that correlates to career options. So marrying the two is helping students understand their major, minor, certificate options, degree options, etc., and then having a summer internship experience, even if it's volunteer experience, where they can actually learn how a nonprofit, how a business, how an organization works, and try something out. And that will give them a little bit more understanding of what they like versus what they don't like. And people might need to have a few experiential learning opportunities, and it doesn't necessarily have to be work, right? Like, I believe that a study abroad opportunity that is adequately tailored to stimulate, intellectual development, I think that's an opportunity where we can consider that experiential learning, where people get out there and experience things, especially in this post-COVID environment. We do a lot of things remote, and that's fine, but there's still something to be said. There's still value in giving young folks an opportunity to get exposure and letting them try things out incrementally, for sure.
Certainly. No, I totally agree. And I think we're getting that. I think we're getting there. And I think that for better and for worse, the way programs are outlined now, where you kind of have to have an internship in order to get the job you want out of most big undergrad programs. For better and for worse, again, it kind of leads itself to forcing students to go through that process. But no, interesting perspectives nonetheless. And I'd be curious, so then you're going through your programs, and while you're doing that, you're working at the Federal Reserve, you're working at the Treasury Department. Now you're at Industrial Bank. What were those roles like for you? I know you said you met your wife along the way there as well. Fast forward me through those programs, and then getting you to your current day-to-day now.
Man, I can't say enough. And I stayed at certain institutions for maybe a year and a half. I moved around a lot because impact drove me, and also my intellectual growth. So I would learn a lot in one place, and I'm like, okay, I'm not full. I don't have it all together, but I think there's another part of this that I want to learn. And the main law that I was engaged with, and I still am to this day, is the Community Reinvestment Act. And so I learned CRA from the high-level Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System level, overseeing the modernization of the law, the reg as it stands. And then I went to NCRC, where their job is to support advocacy groups, community groups, small business owners on how to leverage and use the CRA to help them, do what they need to do in their communities to support low and moderate income individuals and entities. So I was able to see it from that level. And then as a bank examiner, I was able to see it from the perspective of the enforcement level. making sure that banks are actually doing, and if they're not, weighing the heavy hand on how we should, I won't say penalize, I'll just say how we respond to the deficiencies they may or may not have in their CRA program. And then at Treasury, Treasury was just a little bit of everything. I had no idea how rich my experience at Treasury would be. I was able to have my hands on so many different things and work with so many cool people in such a short amount of time. I would still be there to this day if this wonderful opportunity at Industrial Bank didn't present itself. But I will say this, fun fact, I was able to meet the heads of every federal financial regulator. So I had a one-on-one with Jay Powell when I was at the Federal Reserve Board, and he was great. We talked in his office. I gotta show you the picture. My hair was crazy. It was crazy long, but I had a one-on-one with Jay Powell. I was able to meet the CFPB director, Director Chopra. I was able to talk to Secretary Yellen. I was able to connect with Martin Gruenberg, chairman of the FDIC, Thompson from the FHFA, and Michael Hasu from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. And so I was able to meet them and really interact with them in person. And that was really helpful. So when I watched the FOMC press conference, like I feel a sense of relationship to Jay Powell and the Federal Reserve. It doesn't feel like it's just a stranger talking, right? And I've met several Federal Reserve Bank presidents, Raphael Bostic, in the hallways at the board, and former Federal Reserve Bank presidents, and I'm connected with them on LinkedIn. And so like now, it's just really, it's really awesome to be in this space now, to feel like I'm at Industrial Bank, NBI, CDFI, who has done so much in this community over the years. And I can pour all my information, resources, et cetera, into the institution while helping them, stay within the guidelines of the rules and regulations so we can achieve our strategic growth plans. And and so very, very long-winded answer to your question, but just that experience, again, I'm kind of touching on experience. If we want to talk about undergraduate students and graduate students, being able to go into these spaces, feel welcome, and get some experience and talk to people who've been doing something for 20, 30 years, and people who are on TV, or they know people on TV, or they're in the mix, it can really draw someone in. It drew me in on so many levels and really inspire someone to make an impact. And for me, that's what gets me up every morning, knowing that, hey, the decisions I make today are going to affect me and my family. But there's some phone calls that I can make today. There's some decisions that I can make. There's something I can review and give to somebody and strategically frame a answer to something that may affect people around the world, around the country, in different communities. So it's really exciting to be in the position that I am now at 33. I just turned 33 last Saturday, and to imagine what I can accomplish through Industrial Bank and other institutions that I'm a part of in the next decade.
First of all, happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
From all of us, just me at R4E. But I mean, like I said, I keep harping on this, but I fully align with what you're saying here. And I'd be curious. I mean, just it's been 50, so you probably spent a decade or so in football and around sports as a kid and going through school. You've been in this space for probably close to a decade now as well, just kind of around and growing to this spot. If you could rewind back to fall of, when did you start at Blacksburg? Fall of 2008?
Yes.
Rewind to fall 2008, you're putting your pads on, get your cleats laced up, getting ready to go. If you could rewind and tell 18-year-old Zoe that, hey, one day you're going to be really into compliance and government policy and the regulations around financial institutions, do you think that 18-year-old you would have laughed in your face, or do you think somewhere deep in the back of your brain as a kid you had some thought of this path?
He would think about it. He would think about it, because I've always had a curious mind. I've always been an avid reader. Honestly, when I was in elementary school, we had this program called Accelerated Reader, where I'm not sure if you know this, but there's probably similar programs around the country where if you read books, you take tests, and you get points based on the test.
Mm.
more points you get, they would keep track of scores. And so students were rewarded on the points they got. And I was always competing to get the most points. So for me, there, I've always loved to read. I mean, it was the Boxcar Children, it was the Hardy Boys, the Nancy Drew Mysteries, and that really kept me into reading. So I've always been an avid reader and very comfortable with it. So me going back and telling myself that I will be in banking and doing things at this level, I don't think I would be surprised. I would be more confused about the how.
Hmm.
The how do I get there, right?
Yeah.
What does that process even look like? And
No, I mean, it's like we talked about before we started filming. It's going left when you thought you were going to be going right, whether it was up to you or not. And I
right,
feel like that we've talked through that today. And I know one of your main quotes, and I'm going to read it because I'll be afraid that I mess it up. It's the leaders of tomorrow are present today.
yes,
Did you always, even when, I guess going back, being the reader as elementary school, or going through your football program, going through your grad programs, have you always had that same philosophy, or is that something that's come to you in time spent with Yellen and Powell and all these other unbelievable leaders? When did that kind of philosophy come to you?
I think it's come over the years where I've come to realize that being resilient and having people skills, it can take one so far in life because you're always going to get no's and you're going to get yeses sometimes. You can't give up because of those no's. You have to think about it like it's probability. You get 9 no's, you got to be resilient enough to go after that 10th no, because that 10th no might be that first yes, right? So just being resilient and understanding how important that is, and also situating myself within the context of the world and how it's changing with the technology. Culture is shifting in so many ways. The way we experience our day-to-day lives are nothing like anything that has ever existed in human history, right? Like we're really making history. And so a lot of times when I talk to my peers over the last decade, right? Like, and I did a lot of mentoring on campus at Virginia Tech and Arizona State. I would talk to a lot of my peers and my mentees, and people would look up at these leaders who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, right? People who are making decisions about our lives and feel like they're just helpless, and we're out of that experience. We're out of that realm. That's not for us to be a part of. When I would encourage people to say like, hey, whatever experiences we're having now are preparing us for leadership for the future. There's going to be a huge wealth transfer, a huge generational leadership shift that is about to happen, and we need to be prepared to lead because the world is not as simple as we think, although sometimes it is. However, the way our systems and institutions work is not as simple as we think, and if we just brush it off as something that's political or something that we can't be a part of, we'll miss the point and we'll miss areas of development. So I want to encourage people around me, I don't care, strangers, to be the best version of themselves, because the leaders that they're looking for or looking up towards won't be there in the next 20, 30, 40 years. It's going to be us. It's going to be all of us.
Interesting. When I read that, I was thinking more the leaders of tomorrow are present, like they are focused in the now. But you're saying literally the leaders of tomorrow are here today.
We're already here. So guess what? If we think about the leaders who are on TV all the time, private sector, public sector, they were 40, 30, 20 in college. They went to high school. They had their experiences. So at a certain point, in high school or college, people didn't know who they would be, who they are today, right? So
Yeah.
we're here now, and we have an opportunity to get involved, whether that's in private industry, the public sector, whether that's working in your community to solve a community problem like homelessness, affordable housing. We can do stuff today and we can lead in our own respective rights right now. But as we get those experiences, that's just preparing us for more and more responsibility in the next few decades. So Yeah, the leaders of tomorrow are present today. We're here. It's you, it's me, it's your family, it's my family, it's your community, my community, and everyone involved. We all have a role to play. It's not just one hero like a lot of the superhero movies, right? It's a whole
Oh, well, that's the episode title right there. I already have it in my brain ready to go. That's
bunch.
no, it's fantastic and so true. I guess to that end, and as we wrap here, what I mean, practicing what you preach. What are you doing today on top of all of the amazing hard work? And I'm sure a ton of reading and everything else. You're obviously climbing the ranks quickly at Industrial Bank in your role there. What do you have in mind from a goals perspective? What are you projecting out in the future? What are you trying to accomplish over the next couple of years? A loaded question, I know, but you've accomplished so much, but you just turned 33. So what are you looking forward to? What are you trying to accomplish? What's on the docket for Zoe over the next, call it short term, long term? You tell me.
My goal is to build power, build our brand, build our legacy. It's not about money per se. It's about impact. And when when I realized that, again, I'm harping on something I said earlier, that the decisions that I make can have an incredibly life-changing effect on others. Like I'm serving on the board of a nonprofit who is looking to provide transition housing for minority homeless veterans in Southeast DC. You know, that's a major issue. There are a lot of veterans sleep on the streets around the country and also in the DC region. And so I just joined the board as part of our CRA requirement for Industrial Bank. And I was able to spend time with the leader of the nonprofit. And we've made so much progress in the last month. And she told me that my presence, my perspective, my influence has, led to some new opportunities and kickstarted her at a point where she started to feel like her faith and her belief in herself and getting this program off the ground was wavering. And so for me to think about that type of impact, it's like, a year from now, hopefully that transition house is full of formerly homeless veterans who have a place to stay, who have a safe place to stay. There's some community programming, there's some career job readiness support, there's some financial literacy. And then, they're out there in the workforce, they're out there producing in society and making a difference and feeling better about themselves. So that's on my mind, right? Stuff like that. It could be that scale or it could be a lot larger macro scale where I'm going through the political appointee process at one of the financial federal regulators. But I feel like there's always different levels of impact. And I want to build power, build relationships, build wealth across communities in the United States and just holistically in the US.
I mean, so if anyone can knock it out, I know it's you. I mean, since the last time we spoke was probably a little over 4 years ago or so when I was leaving Blacksburg, and just seeing how much you've accomplished since then, I have no doubt in my mind that you'll be able to knock out whatever you set your goals or looking to accomplish. And so my family and friends listening will know and probably laugh at this part, but I'm big on this idea of energy and vibrations. And anytime I was in Blacksburg and we would run into each other, you would always just emit positivity, emit good energy. And I know you're probably still carrying that with you. I know for a fact, actually, not probably. I know you're carrying that with you to this day. And so just keep doing what you're doing. And I know you've got big things in store, and I'm here to support you however I can.
Thank you. And I appreciate you for bringing that up. Some people might think it's a little cheesy or people overuse it, but you never know what people are going through, right? And I'm not saying you got to be super positive and change people's lives intentionally, but you never know what horrible phone call, horrible news or sad news that somebody just had, right? You never know how a handshake, a hug, a smile, asking someone how they're doing can really affect just their day, which it's trickle down effect. Like you and I know that trickle down effect, knowing that, it also means like there's a certain responsibility, like you have to bring your best self, because you can make a difference in someone's life. And in that case, you're changing the world. So a lot of times people think about changing the world as like solving world hunger, it's solving world like poverty. It's like, no, you can change the world, someone's world in a sense, but it doesn't have to be that macro. Change someone's world on a day-to-day basis, and it doesn't have to be this grand scheme.
There's that saying, you don't have to change the world, you just have to change a world. And yeah, like I said, I mean, that was anytime we'd run into each other. And to your point, it's that trickle down effect. If I'm able to share that positivity with someone else and so on and so forth, that's how we keep this thing going around. So just know it never went unnoticed. I greatly appreciate you. And I'm so happy we were able to catch up on this. And now that you're back or I guess whenever you're back in the DC area from Houston, we'll have to get together in person.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome, Zoe. I appreciate you hopping on today. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Take care.
Hey, I'll